Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another part of the No Turning Back series. Today, Stan McChrystal and I have a great discussion with the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, Alex Gorsky. Alex is a West Point graduate and has, after serving in the military, went straight into industry, had an exceptional career, and now overseeing an amazing organization that is right at the center of this COVID-19 pandemic. So we dive deep into several areas that I think you'll find really important in today's discussion. Alex's view on managing such a large organization in such complex times, a bit of his views on mentoring leaders up and grooming the next generation, and his view on where this is taking us. He has an optimistic outlook on how they're forming non-standard partnerships during such a critical time for all of us. Alex is truly, you will see this, an exceptional leader. No wonder he's gotten to the position he has, and it really underscores the great work that he and others at Johnson & Johnson are doing for all of us right now. So hope you enjoy the discussion as much as we did. Alex, thank you for taking the time to join us here on No Turning Back. Stan and I are really looking forward to the discussion. I'd like to take just the opportunity to ask first question. Really, given, your position there at J&J and the intensity of what you must be experiencing as a leader, how has this last few months impacted your thinking and your approach to leadership?
Well, Chris and Stan, first of all, thank you for all that you were doing to educate and inform leaders across our country and let alone around the world on really important topics regarding leadership and development and service. And it's a real honor, and I'm humbled to be here today to talk to you about these topics. And, look, in many ways, what I'm experiencing today reminds me and harkens back to my days as a soldier and just having an incredible sense of mission. I mean, I could never have realized when I was a young kid growing up in the Midwest, in Kansas and Michigan, or going to the academy, or being in the Army, or frankly, even in Johnson & Johnson, that here 30 or 40 years later, I would be in a situation where, frankly, the world is facing one of the most significant existential threats, challenges that we collectively have ever faced in history, and to realize and understand not only the opportunity, but really the accountability and the responsibility that we have as a company like Johnson & Johnson, where we could actually be part of solving this really important issue vis-a-vis a vaccine or other medicines, is something I couldn't even have dreamed of. But that doesn't just happen on its own. It happens because we've got literally thousands of scientists, of physicians, of engineers, of leaders around the world working, 24/7, 365, doing everything they can to accelerate, to marshal the resources and capabilities to make that happen. But it's all coming from, I believe, this source of mission that is far bigger than any one of us alone, and that is absolutely essential for the world right now.
Alex, the organization, no doubt, feels the importance of what they're doing. But at the same time, you've got this great, big, capable organization which needs to be directed and prioritized, particularly in times like this. How do you do that?
Well, Stan, I'm sure you might agree from your experience in leadership is that there are certain things as a leader that are absolutely essential that be clear and crystallized from the top. There are other things that, frankly, you need to ensure that are done where you are closest to what is actually taking place, where people have the most direct knowledge, the most direct skills or capabilities to address that particular issue. And so what I find is that ensuring that we're rallying the organization, so in this case for a vaccine, that we've been very clear about the prioritization that it is for the enterprise in terms of people, in terms of responsibilities, in terms of resources that we're putting forth, in terms of how we're working with governments and regulators and other people around the world. Then there are many other aspects of this, frankly, where we need to leave it, frankly, to the scientists who have spent their entire lives working in a particular area in a collaborative manner, but to make that decision at the local level on which particular path we may take to choose a specific vaccine candidate, let's say, or what type of trial design should be made. And I think having that balance all the time between, what do you want to direct more centrally to ensure that you're not getting caught up in bureaucracy, that you're not being slowed down just from a failure or lack of decisiveness, versus what you need to keep out and closest to the action, to where your people can have the autonomy, the decision-making authority, the kind of accountability and responsibility they need so that they can move quickly in a very agile, fast, high sense of urgency way. And I think thinking about that all the time, and look, sometimes it's not just in the big decisions that we make, it's the little things that we do. Just as I'm sure you can remember from your experiences, I certainly do with mine, even to this day, something that influences my leadership is something called the commander's intent. And that always share that larger strategic intent and then leave people the latitude, the flexibility to decide exactly where, how, and when, what they need to do to achieve that overall intent and objective. And that's something else that we try to do. So I think it's those combination of skills and the kind of thinking that we try to inculcate into an organization, even like Johnson & Johnson.
Perfect.
Can you talk dive a little bit deeper on that, Alex? Because I mean, it's a fantastic point. Couldn't agree more. How have you evolved that? Because that's the conversation that so many leaders are having now. I need to empower my people, especially right now. And our quick response is, well, you're not going to do that like today, right? That's a long cycle build. Can you talk a little bit about the tools and techniques you were using pre-crisis and how that helped in a moment like this?
Sure. And Chris, you're right. We're always looking at things in a certain window of time when in fact they occur more over a continuum. And, Johnson & Johnson, we have a more than 130-year history of having been very decentralized, where our various business units and over 250 companies organized into, our overall enterprise that could be working in different regions. One could be working in a consumer sector, a medical device sector, a pharmaceutical sector, and having different responsibilities. And for years, particularly when we had a more decentralized customer base, we found that to be a way, again, to really drive performance, accountability, responsibility, not only at the local level, but also at a global level. Of course, when you're a $10 billion company, you can run an organization that way. When you're an $85 billion company, however, it's critical that you have certain strategic imperatives. Otherwise, frankly, it can be chaos. But striking that balance is something that we've worked very hard on. There are certain areas, if it comes to financial systems, IT systems, for example, where, frankly, if we have too many systems, we're neither effective nor are we efficient. And it can actually create risk for the organization. On the other hand, if we try to decide every decision in New Jersey, it can leave us, frankly, far away from our customers and their, emerging and real needs at any particular point in time. And so we, our leadership team, frankly, has been on a bit of a journey over the last decade in striking that right balance. But, what I saw in this case, for example, was as soon as we started getting some of the information from our team in China and Asia, late in December and early January, we quickly assembled a crisis management team so that we wanted their, complete and total focus to be on rallying the enterprise on this particular issue, to cut through verticals, to cut through horizontals, to cut through some of the bureaucracy that would ordinarily be in place to ensure that our teams there were getting the support that they needed. We then took those lessons very early that we learned in those markets about what we were doing to protect employees, about what we were doing to continue to support customers and our suppliers. And we quickly spread those to other areas as we saw the disease and as we saw the virus, unfortunately, leap around the world. As we made the decision, I believe on March 18th, to no longer be working centrally in facilities, our senior leadership team, Stan, I believe much in the way that your team would meet every morning at 8 o'clock. We had a joint meeting of our executive committee, which we wouldn't ordinarily do, to say, okay, what's going on in our business, in our supply chain? What's going on with government affairs, with human resources and our employees? You know, we put real-time tracking systems in place where weekly we surveyed more than 2,500 employees, asking how they felt about the support they were getting, what else they needed to do to get their jobs, how connected they were to the organization. And so we tried to create this very agile, nimble way of working, recognizing that for a 140,000 employee company, as broad and as big as we were, that we couldn't leave it to our usual protocols or processes, but we needed to become much more adaptive to successfully, prioritize in this kind of an environment. And I've got to say, I'm incredibly proud of the way that the organization has rallied. Our scores internally show us that we are at the highest levels of engagement with employees. And what that means is on a 1 to 5 scale, if you check a box 4 or 5 being the highest, 87% of our employees surveyed say they feel confident in the steps the company's taken, in how they're being supported, in the confidence in the future of the company. And when you think about it in the context of what's happening in today's environment, I think having those kind of real-time sensing, information sharing systems in place, adapting them real time, is more important than ever.
Alex, I'm going to take you out of the C-suite on a short journey. Actually, it's a pretty long journey. It's going to go through several decades. And CEO Alex Gorsky, well-known corporate leader, goes to Florida, to the Florida Ranger Camp, and runs into Cadet Gorsky, who is in the Florida phase of Ranger School. You're in the swamp, you're wet, you're tired, you're probably lost, you may be discouraged. And Ranger student Gorsky looks at CEO Alex and says, "What's important?" What would you say to him?
That's a great question. And I remember that day like it was yesterday, because I was in a situation where I needed my last patrol, and I think it was the last day of the 10-day patrol, and I hadn't had it yet. And suddenly, for the final beach landing, I was the patrol leader. I think the most important lesson where I am today to teach me then is, in my current role, it is not so much about your individual leadership that makes a difference at any particular point in time, but it's how do you bring together, recruit, select, develop a team of leaders that, frankly, as a group, reflects a much stronger force than any one of us alone. Also often early in our careers, we're competitive. We want to make sure that we're striving ahead and that we're winning. And I think the perspective of years are that, none of us possess all the knowledge that we need, all the information, and that collectively bringing together the best minds, the best experiences, again, makes us far stronger, far more capable as an organization, and particularly in an organization as diverse as Johnson & Johnson. You think about all the technologies. I can be in a meeting with our pharmaceutical group talking about a new vector vaccine, where we're going to try to take a snippet of the virus and insert it inside as software to work on a coronavirus, or a new approach for multiple myeloma involving a CD3 mechanism. I can go into the next room and I can be talking about digital surgery, where we're going to use Google-like technology to help guide a catheter so that we can do an ablation at a particular point in a surgery almost as if you're using your GPS to guide you as you're driving your car. And I can be in the next room talking about, what's the ad campaign that we should be using for our next Neutrogena product. So the diverse array of sciences, of technologies, of capabilities, it's far too much for any one person to master. But I think being able to put the people in place who indeed are the experts, to be able to look across those domains and look for opportunities to build on each other, to complement each other, to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. I think that's probably one of the most important lessons that I've learned since those days on that Eglin Air Base field many years ago.
It's funny you mentioned that, because when Chris and I were together in JSOC, I remember we'd go to places and our forces would be doing something really technical. And my response would be, we can do that?
That's
and
right.
They look at me like, why are you in charge?
It's amazing. But that's also, as I'm sure you probably felt, that's one of the coolest parts of my job, because you get to be around just such incredibly bright people who in some cases have spent 15, 20, 25 years of their career going so deep into a particular area and being such experts, and being in just the intellectual challenge of being exposed again to all those different domains and those different areas is quite stimulating, and something that really I think makes my job so enjoyable and so challenging at the same time.
Can I build on that a little bit? Because I had a conversation with a senior leader recently, and they were asking, how does this model that you all lived and espouse around sort of decentralizing authorities, exactly as you described, how does that not? This was a person that had recently taken over a large organization. How does that not make me less effective as a leader? Like, how is that not just giving up control, which is an understandable risk? And my response to him was, this is actually creating an army of you. You're letting people inside your head so that they're empowered to make those types of decisions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on A, that in general. Am I capturing what you said? And B, how do you groom leaders? And that's critical in the military. You seem to be describing it there. You're trying to not just tell people what to do, but to mentor them up to be your next generation of leaders.
I think there's at least a couple of dynamics that I always keep in mind in really creating that kind of a culture. And one is for us, and I think this was true in the military as well, of sharing a common value system. And in our case, it's based on our credo. An ethos written by the son of our founder more than 75 years ago, that back in the 1940s, in less than 300 words, literally wrote out that, look, we have a commitment to the mothers and the fathers, the doctors and surgeons who use our products, that they should be of high quality and meet their needs, that we should take care of our employees. Remember, this is the 1940s, when sometimes the union industry relationship wasn't necessarily so tight. Talking about giving your employees a fair wage, a safe working environment to help employees be their best. And in the third paragraph, he really went off the rails, given the dynamics of his time, where he said, and we should give back to the communities where we live and work, where others who are not as fortunate. And then finally, he said, and we should also ensure that our shareholders get a fair return. And by the way, he owned 51% of the company when he wrote that, so he put himself last. But understanding that we have this dynamic where we have to do our best to serve multiple stakeholders, that it's not either or, it's and. And we always have to be thinking about these constituencies simultaneously and not discretely, forces people, I think, ultimately to make a better decision. And by having that as the moral compass, the North Star, and then making sure, frankly, if you're recruited by Johnson & Johnson, I can guarantee you that the first question you will have on your interview is, tell us about the Johnson & Johnson credo and what it would mean to you. And so while the technologies can change in situations and dynamics, for us, when you share that value system and then you hire people that agree and believe in it and bring it to life every day, that's what enables us to have that kind of a balanced, decentralized, and in certain areas more standardized system, and ensure that you've got the kind of accountability and responsibility, but that you also got the creativity, that you've got the kind of innovation that we need to keep a company like ours going. I think it's the combination of those things that makes it work.
Wow. Alex, I remember when I was a young lieutenant, as a young paratrooper, I remember a 3-star general driving by in the field, and I envied him. I said, one, his job can't be that hard, and he's got a Jeep. He ain't walking.
That's right.
But you find out later when you get at higher levels, there are some things that are really hard. What are the hardest decisions you face? What are the ones you dread having to make?
Well, Stan, I find that the most challenging decisions I face in my role are the ones where sometimes, look, there's no great decision, maybe just one that's marginally better than another. And to the earlier point, I'm surrounded by just remarkable leaders. And so by the time a decision usually gets to my desk, it's not because this is clearly better, quantitatively better than this. It's gray, it's qualitative, it's subjective. And those types of decisions are almost always a challenge because they involve trade-offs and things ultimately that are not only going to affect me or a small group, but could potentially affect hundreds of thousands of people. And many of our customers, or other stakeholders that we ultimately serve. And so look, whenever I'm faced with that kind of a decision, mentoring that I got a long time ago is spot on. They said that, don't ever let someone else's inability or, lack of making decision turn into your crisis. Sleep on it. And I figure if it's made its way to my desk, sleeping on it is a good idea. It's not a sign of indecisiveness. But it's a sign, frankly, of reflection. And I know that when I wake up in the morning and I finalize that decision, that I have more certainty that ultimately I'm doing the right thing for all those people concerned. And I try to approach it that way. Look, decisions around reorganizations that involve people and lives. And it's not only about your employees, but each one of your employees represents families. They represent communities at times. Can be challenging decisions. But I think that's why leaders are ultimately in the roles that we're in, is to help guide and in a very inclusive, manner, ultimately make those decisions that are in the best long-term interests of everyone.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because people often come to me and they go, life and death decisions must have been the most difficult. And I said, no, because we dealt in that.
Right.
The hard one was making a personnel decision on someone who's given their life to the organization, but for some reason or another just isn't ready or capable of the next level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a great framing. Stan and I've taught a leadership course together for a few years now, and one of the points we try to make to the students there is you haven't really been in a leadership moment until you have 3 options. You have to pick one, and you don't like any of them.
Right.
That's when it gets real.
That's right.
Because if there's an easy one, the person below you would have already made the decision, right?
Well, the only thing that I would add to that, Chris, is not only that you have 3 options and you don't like any of them, but then you also have got to live with them for 3 years. It's all too often, sometimes you'll see people in careers where, they kind of hop from lily pad to lily pad, just keeping their toe out of getting in the water. And it can look like, oh, it's been a nice dance, versus no, having to really get her. And as you know, sometimes it takes a year for you to actually learn what you're doing. Your second one to actually implement change so that you demonstrate that you know what you're doing. And then your third year, you actually have to live with the decisions that you made and go, oh, I didn't get that right. That's what I usually see where the real development takes place and the real maturation and reflection that ultimately make you a better leader.
Yeah, I got a great piece of advice from a mentor as we were growing our firm, who said, be wary of the perfect resume that has 18-month increments.
That's right.
That exact point.
Yep.
You don't know what they left in their wake.
I like to see that durability, that resilience, that kind of grit, where people have learned by doing, and they're going to make a few mistakes along the way, but they're going to be so much better off when they're in that tough situation in the future.
Alex, just a little pivot here, because I would love to, just given the complexity of the world you're in right now, and sort of mapping over to what I watched Stan McChrystal do with our forces in the military, opening the aperture and forcing a conversation down into our ranks about creating non-traditional relationships with other parts of who would become our close partners, realizing this problem is so much bigger than any one of us. We have to create networks outside of our little world that might seem unusual or uncomfortable. I'm assuming some of that is going on in your world. How are you approaching those discussions?
Yeah, I think one of the most dangerous pitfalls that we have as leaders, particularly in large organizations, is becoming too insular and too focused inward, because we are surrounded by so many processes, by so many fences, that we can stare at our navels all day long, and we can feel very good about that, very proud, and even somewhat productive, because you can move things through that bureaucracy. But ultimately, the question you have to ask yourself is, but what have you actually done to change things? And so I think there's got to be a constant quest of, how do you stay outwardly focused? In my case, how are we connecting with customers? One of the things that I found early on in this, Chris, is that my engagement with customers actually increased significantly. There probably were, for the first 3 or 4 weeks, on a daily basis, I would be talking to anywhere between 5 or CEOs of major hospital systems around the country, real time, trying to get data and information about what were they seeing with the surge in their particular area, what was their PPE supply like, what were they seeing with the acuity of the patients versus, potentially in other systems, trying to share that information in different ways. But again, that I would not have done that under normal circumstances. But because we were facing this kind of situation, I felt that, making that connection and working outside the normal, standards that we would, was something just very important, and certainly put me in greater touch. And I had a much better understanding and empathy for what was occurring. And in fact, I'm proud of the fact that even some of the congressional leaders and government officials that I talked to, trying to ensure that they understood the acute situation in the hospitals outside of New York City and New Jersey, where clearly they were facing major challenges. But in other places, you saw a very low hospital census, you saw costs go up, and it created significant strain, such that if they did hit an additional wave later on, or as we would try to reopen the economy, certainly we would need strong, robust healthcare systems to do that. And again, making sure that we were in communication, that we were understanding and learning real time what was going on, was very helpful, and I think essential for us to help make a difference as well.
Right. Alex, I'm going to end with one question. I had what I was going to ask about the future, but I really want to get more personal, because I've known you for a number of years now.
Sure.
And I think it's important for young leaders to hear this. I get tired, I get frustrated, I get angry. You don't. I have never seen you not be thoughtful about the people around you, not be considerate, not be balanced. So what do you do? How do you live to do that?
I always try to understand and consider the impact that I'm going to have on the people around me. And look, I think it's here too, it's a balance, Stan, because I think what people want to see in leaders today is they want to see authenticity. They want to see you be real, that if you're irritated or ticked off, that, you know, you're real enough so that you can express that to them, that you understand it and that they get it. But I also am a firm believer, and I remember this through my career, that that kind of metaphor. Are you the kind of leader that comes into a room and you take energy out of the room, or do you bring energy into the room? And it's not a hoorah energy, but it's that you can be a quiet leader, you can be a loud leader, you can be action oriented, you can be thoughtful, but you just know it when you're around them. And I always try to put myself in a position where I want people to leave thinking that they are potentially more inspired about our company and about the mission that we're on and about the outlook for our future. And so that's the goal by which I measure myself in those situations. And I try to, you know, like strike that right balance. And again, it doesn't mean once in a while I won't get irritated. My team will certainly tell you that. But you know, I find that if I can accomplish that in, you know, my daily activities, and by the way, it's the kind of thing where you have to make constant ongoing deposits in small, intimate meetings and small team. It's not like you just go out there on the grand stage and you do it all at once. It's like you're depositing those dimes every day in that bank, and over time it builds a lot of interest and trust, and I think respect and credibility. And so I think that's the way that I overall try to approach it.
Yeah. Well, I would say I think you've done a marvelous job, and I highlight the point. You forge relationships and credibility and good habits day after day, week after week, year after year, and they make a difference for other people, which is
absolutely.
Let me start by thanking you for giving us your precious time this afternoon, and pass it to Chris.
Alex, yeah, I can't imagine a better note to close on. That was just a fantastic summation of really the art of leadership, which is the conversations we're trying to get to here. So on behalf of Stan and myself, can't say thank you enough for giving us so much of your time in what must be an incredibly busy period. So best of luck to you and your team. Well, again, Stan, thank you guys for all the work that you're doing. It's always a great time talking to you and connecting like this. And you know, let me leave you with this thought. It'll be a challenging road ahead. We still have a lot of twists and turns, but we're going to get through this, and we're going to be stronger on the other side than we are today. And by you helping to educate and inform people about leadership and these things, that makes a huge contribution. So thank you very much. Keep up the great work, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much, Alex.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, I thought that was a great discussion. Hope you got as much out of that as I certainly did, and I know Stan McChrystal did as well. That's the goal of the No Turning Back series. Have serious discussions with serious leaders, and we can all learn from them, especially at a time like this. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll see you next time here on No Turning Back.